Welcome everyone to tonight's Blik of the Wereld, Syria, brought to you by D66 International. Since we have an international guest with us, we will do this conversation in English. Today or tonight we will take a deep dive into Syria. And I will do that with my expert panel here. Online we have Ali Al-Yassam. He is a Syrian academic and he's doing a PhD in conflict studies at the University of Utrecht. We have Petra Stienen, former senator for D66 and Syria expert. And we have Pantsu Bamenga with us. He is a member of parliament for D66 and he is also a human rights activist. Our expert panel will provide insights into the path forward for Syria, especially after the fall of Assad. I would like to urge you to ask all your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to answer most of them, or as many as possible. And Ali, I would like to start with you. On December 6, 2024, there was an article published in the NRC, a Dutch newspaper, from you. And in this article, you wrote that the Assad regime was at the weakest point in history. And shortly after, 2 days actually, on December 8th, ATS, a rebel group in Syria, formally captures Damascus, following the collapse of Aleppo, Hama, and Homs, as well as the fall of the Assad regime. Ali, how did you follow these developments, these very rapid developments in those days in December?
Thank you, Morel, and good evening to you, to your esteemed guest, Petra Mpunzu, the audience who are following online. It's surreal actually to be talking about this topic. I mean, as a Syrian who had participated and have gone through the different stages of the Syrian uprising, the Syrian revolution, I have never thought that I would be actually hosted to talk about the fall of the Assad regime when just a couple of weeks before the fall of the regime, many governments, many European governments, including the Dutch government, were actually seriously talking about re-engaging with Assad, taking serious steps to make official visits, reinstate embassy and ambassadors in Damascus, just ignoring the suffering of the Syrian people that have been going on since 2011, the atrocities, including the use of chemical weapons attacks against the Syrian people. So all these events combined were so real actually to realize that the regime could fall in 11 days. So on the 27th of November, HDS, under the umbrella of military operation management, started a military operation in the west of Aleppo under the title of deterrence of aggression. The plan was actually first to push a bit and to aiming to take the city of Aleppo. During my visit in Syria to Damascus, I met a couple of people who were actually at the military hierarchy who talked about the planning of this operation. Interestingly, they didn't actually plan, or they didn't think that they are going to go as far as Hama or let alone Damascus. So they were planning only to go for Aleppo, and then the regime started to stumble and advancements were made rapid during these times. So it was such a euphoric moment in history to witness the fall of the regime. And a small anecdote: when I was following this closely with the friends during that week, and we were betting on Assad fighting until the last breath, or leaving the country. And my bet actually was he is too coward actually to fight, because he has never been for the Syrian people. He has been always for himself. So that was, of course, the events were rapid, but on the night, the last night, it was very evident that he was such a selfish person when he didn't inform his brother, his partner in crimes. There were reports of him manipulating his team, calling his advisor to come to office and prepare a speech for him. Butaina Shaban, I'm pretty sure Petra knows this woman very well. When she arrived to office, he turned out to be flying in the air. So all these combined show the reality of Assad, and also how deceived actually the international community by this person. So it's again a call for all those who are fighting for freedom, who are fighting for justice, not to lose hope, and also a call for officials, for governments, for democratic, between two brackets, governments, not to underestimate the people's will, and they should align with the people's aspirations and will, not with the dictators.
That's a beautiful message. Like you said, you wouldn't expect to be here at this point, and yet you are. And Petra, you were among the first Europeans to visit Syria in January. And we will show some images of your visit. You have spoken to several Syrians when you were in Damascus and when you were in Deir Musa, which is a very famous monastery in the mountains, very beautiful. What are your key takeaways from the conversations that you had with Syrians when you visited Syria?
Yeah, so just following up on what Ali said, and this is something that I felt as well when I was in Damascus. I went after not having been there for 15 years. I was a diplomat from 1999 to 2004. I worked a lot on asylum, migration, human rights. And after sort of the revolution started in 2011, I stayed in contact with many Syrian activists in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, in Berlin, in Amsterdam, who were working on women's rights, on transitional justice. So Ali says the regime fell in 11 years, but I actually think he's being very modest of the work that so many civil society activists have done over the past 15 years. Every Syrian I know paid a price. So the freedom in Syria is a freedom with a very dark lining. Yeah. The country is in shambles. As Ali said, Bashar al-Assad did not protect his people, none of them. And you can tell this when you drive through Damascus and also when you drive through the countryside. So rural Damascus is completely destroyed. I mean, one of our companions said it's like a potato pancake. So all the houses have been bombarded with barrel bombs, and it's a horrible sight to see. But at the same time, the joy and the relief and people saying we can breathe again and we can paint the picture of the Assad family with the new flag, which is actually not a new flag, it's the revolutionary flag. And I think one of the pictures, we will see it pretty soon now, one of the big questions now for Syria is, and this is the first message I got, is please give us time.
Yeah.
We had 54 years of dictatorship, 14 years of war. We need to commemorate the people we lost, but we also want to feel the joy of being free, of being able to breathe again. The second question, or the second message I got from the Syrians, and of course there are many layers underneath these three key messages, is please trust us. We are the alternative. I know Ali will have received his questions many times as well. Who is the alternative to Bashar al-Assad? And then the Syrians say, we are the alternative. We're 23 million people. Why do you think that a horrible dictator is the only one who can represent us? So trust us. And the third message, and I think this is a very important one also when Mopanzo will chip in on international cooperation, of course, the country is in shambles. There is 3 hours of electricity in Damascus. Every 7th hour, there is an hour of electricity. People have to boil water, to take a little bit of warm water to wash themselves. There is immense poverty, the inflation, you have no idea. When I left Syria, $1 was 50 lira. Now $1 is 11,000 lira. People are poor. There are beggars in the streets. And this is Damascus, it's the capital. But I heard outside it's even worse. So the third message is, yes, we need help, outside help, but please under our conditions, in conversation with the Syrians. Don't decide, they have this beautiful saying, not about us, without us. And I think this is really true for the way we should approach the Syrians for a better future for them.
Yeah. And Ali, do you recognize this, what Petra said in the conversations that you have with fellow Syrians?
Definitely. To come from a practitioner input, I went to Damascus as part of MSF, Doctors Without Borders, or Artsum Sonder Grenzen team, to make needs assessment. And I left in 2000. I haven't been in Damascus since 2010. So the images that I have seen at least in the medical field are shocking. The needs are really high. The health infrastructure is collapsing, and this is not for Assad or for the military or institutions. I think we will come to the sanctions. So the first message following Petra's steps is help. If we look at the figures and numbers, more than 90% of the Syrian population live officially under the poverty line. So you can imagine how difficult and challenging meeting the daily needs are. As I said, hospitals. I can't describe them as hospitals, to be honest. So these because of the corruption, because of the neglect, they are barely functioning. The sanctions are adding another layer of challenges of spare parts, maintenance, let alone being up to date on technology and connection to the outside world. So this is very important. The other thing is reconstruction. As Petra mentioned, more than 70% of the country is destroyed. If we go back to 2015, 2016, 2015, when the Russians officially intervened to save Assad, 70% of Syria was not under control of Assad, under plethora of other groups. So Assad was actually carpet bombing every area that was outside of his control. Now, if people want to go back, and I know that's a serious discussion in the alleys of the political parties and parliaments. People need to go back where there is decent life. The Syrian revolution was called the revolution of dignity. Mm-hmm. So there is no dignity for people to go back. Towns, neighborhoods are flattened to the ground. We seriously need a Marshall Plan for Syria. Otherwise, procrastinating, postponing interventions, and just conditioning aid, let alone lifting the sanctions, would actually bring the country into another cycle of violence. Because people are not receiving their salaries. The country was depending on Iranian oil. Now Iran is out of the equation. No one can actually give oil or export oil to Syria because of the sanctions. There are donations here and there, but we are talking about running a whole country.
Yeah.
Technologies, internet, electricity, the electricity grid is dysfunctioning. So people are just kind of requesting, give us some. You don't give us money, but help us actually do our business. In order to do the business, we need to reconsider the sanctions.
Yeah. And following up on this dignity and a decent life that all Syrians deserve, Petra, in an interview with the Limburger, with the Shores van Beek, you made the comparison of this very significant moment in Syrian history with May 5th, 1945, Liberation Day in the Netherlands, where there was a big Dutch relief, but at the same time, people realized that they had to work hard for a better future. What do you expect from the rebuilding and transitional justice in Syria?
Yeah, I brought a picture. I think it's number 3 in the list for the team behind the scenes here. I brought it so. After the Second World War, we also had to deal with what happened during the war. Who was with the enemy, who was with the resistance, and what have you. But now going back to Syria, more than 200,000 people have disappeared. More than 500,000 official figures have been murdered. There was a saying, it's either Bashar al-Assad or we burn the country. Well, he did. So the picture you see now on your screen is the central square in Damascus. It's called Marjah Square. It's the Square of the Martyrs. It's a very famous square. And initially, after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, people went there and put the pictures of their loved ones who either were disappeared, were murdered, and they didn't have any information. Then the new caretaker government cleaned the square, and this created a lot of outrage because it's almost like the testimony to the people who disappeared. Now, eventually the families of the disappeared have agreed with the caretaker government that they will look into transitional justice, protect the sites, because in a way all the prisons we saw, Seydnaya and others, are actually crime scenes. Mm-hmm. So you need to collect the material to have a good transitional justice process. And I know that Mpanzu will say a little bit more about international aid after a big conflict, but I think we should not underestimate the emotional, psychological traumas people have gone through and are still, I think the country is still in shock, and many Syrians are still in shock. And this is something, I know that our previous party leader, Sigrid Kaag, when she was Minister for Development Cooperation, she worked a lot on social trauma support in people in post-conflict areas, and this is definitely needed as well for the Syrians, alongside the transitional justice that is needed.
And Panzu, perhaps you can tell us a bit more about the reconstruction and the rebuilding of Syria and the lifting of the sanctions that Ali talked about as well. Because Kaja Kallas, the Vice President of the European Commission and High Representative for Foreign Affairs, she said she wanted to reduce the sanctions bit by bit, step for step. However, that there are also worries about radicalization and what might happen, and there will not be elections soon in Syria. What is your view on lifting the sanctions? Is it necessary for rebuilding Syria?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. I do believe that lifting up the sanctions is very important. And when we think about human rights, I always think about human dignity. And I think it was already been said how important it was, that it should be the revolution of the dignity. And no matter what, how terrible the situation is, if there is conflict or not, one thing always needs to be respected, and that's the human dignity. And it hasn't been respected, and that's really terrible. And you really see the amount of human pain, basically, and suffering in the country. So there is a lot needed to really rebuild the country as it should be. And Petra already said, give us time. Mm-hmm. But I will also say, give the Syrian people an opportunity, give the Syrian people hope. And that begins with rebuilding and making sure that everything is possible. I already heard the Marshall Pact Marshall Plan for Syria. Yeah. It's about the idea that a country should, rebuild itself and should have the opportunity to rebuild itself. They should have the opportunity that companies come and invest in the country. They should have the opportunity that there is more international collaborations. All of that is not possible when there are sanctions. So that's why I think it is very important that the sanctions are being lifted up, especially the general sanctions, because I do believe when there is individual sanctions towards people who committed human rights violations, these sanctions are, I think, important. But when we talk about general sanction, we're actually doing much harm to the vulnerable people in the country. This should be lifted up as soon as possible. And I think that my party is already, D66, Democrat 66, is already doing everything possible to make that happen, is asking questions about it to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we will continue doing that to make sure that those sanctions are lifted up as soon as possible.
Yeah, what does Syria need right now? Ali, perhaps you can tell us something more about this, because in your article you said everyone talks about Syria but not with the Syrians. What do you think would be an effective way for the international community to engage in dialogue with Syrians and to put their interests first?
Sanctions have already been addressed, and I would like again to highlight how important it is for the economy wheel to run. First and foremost, to look at the sectoral sanctions. I very much support them, or in line with what Mpunzu just mentioned, that individuals who are on sanctioned should stay because those are criminals. But if we talk about the central bank, if we talk about the Ministry of Electricity, water, oil, etc., so these are institutions that belong to the Syrian people, to the Syrian state, which is an abstract concept. But if we talk about individuals, of course, those should be persecuted, which brings me to the next very important priority for the Syrian people, which is justice. Without justice, a meaningful transitional justice, the revenge is going to proliferate. those who committed war crimes have to be persecuted. They have to get in courts, in courtrooms, in a prison, so that the families of the victims of the disappeared would restore some form of dignity, because their kids, their sons, daughters' sacrifices were not for nothing. And this needs actually a huge support from international expertise. How it was done in other places. Think of Serbia and former Yugoslavia, Srebrenica, the international tribunals. We have a lot of examples. South Africa. So we need, as Syrians, we need to also look at other cases. The international community can be of great support on that trajectory. Look at what happened in other contexts, so we can have also our own way of transitional justice. Because of course we cannot persecute everyone for just being on the side of the regime. I think Petra can also chip on this. Now there is a great opportunity for people, and Syrian people are, in essence, are kind and they tend to forgive. But we should not forgive those who committed war crimes and crimes against the humanity, because this means impunity. It gives a leeway for other people to do the same. And now sometimes we hear of violations of what is called individual cases. So if we don't if we don't have really clear accountability mechanisms, we will have the old victims becoming new perpetrators. And this can only be prevented by a clear transitional justice trajectory. The third need that people actually need to have is their share on the table. Don't get behind closed doors and decide on behalf of the Syrian people. Of course, every country, every government has its own agendas, but don't make your agendas at the expense of other people. So this is a new coloniality mindset, replacing the classic or the traditional old school. This is not acceptable anymore. I mean, the right wing is on the rise. Trump is the clear example of naming Gulf of America, etc. So we don't need a new one when thinking of Syria or the greater Middle East.
Thank you. I think we've already tackled a lot of subjects, transitional justice, lifting of the sanctions. I would now like to go and see what questions the people at home have for you. And one of them is, how will Syria develop a stable, autonomous state with neighboring states that may not have best interests in Syria, like Israel and Turkey?
Well, if I may say, I must address the position of Ahmed al-Shara, the caretaker president. Podcast suggestion, the rest is politics. Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart have just gone to Damascus and interviewed him. Tonight the YouTube will be online and I will do it on Blue Sky. I listened to the translation and he is a savvy politician. I am impressed. He is doing a lot of diplomatic work in the region. He went to Turkey, he went to Saudi Arabia, the Qatar president came. They have been very smart in the way they're addressing the attacks of Israel and the occupation by Israel of new Syrian ground in addition to the Golan Heights. And for the viewers at home, yes, let's not be naive. This man comes from a jihadist background. And I think it was clear for every Syrian that Bashar al-Assad would not leave without violence. And going back to our own history, the resistance fighters in the Second World War also used violence. I'm not condoning the violence, but I think we have to give him a chance. And this is what I heard from Syrians. Everybody says, we don't like his history, we don't trust him, but it's the only chance we have, and let's support his trajectory in bringing international community around the Syrians to build the country. But of course, it's early days.
Yeah.
It's early days.
Yeah, because to elaborate a bit on that, on the new government in charge of Syria, to what extent does it represent the people of Syria as a whole?
Well, you have to ask the Syrian in the room. You are now all of Syria, Ali.
Yeah. I mean, this is a tricky question in the first place. The other day I was having a conversation with someone who said, "Oh yeah, but you know, but the question is and but." It is very important to confess and to look at the history of the al-Assad family, who destroyed not only the Syrian fabric, but also reputation. So Assad succeeded in having a very two binary position, either me or the jihadist. So that's why it's now coming to the fore that this new argument, Assad was right when he said if I leave, the jihadis are going to take over. But let's go back a bit and look at the great developments that every single group in Syria had undergone. Al-Shara himself, or Jabhat al-Nusra, where he started, Al-Shara himself was in Iraq. He was fighting the Americans in 2006. And then he came back to Syria in end of 2011, beginning of 2012, with the group that is called Jabhat al-Nusra, which was affiliated with Al-Qaeda. But then in 2016, he made some reassessment and reformations, and this actually integrated from Al-Qaeda. So he left Al-Qaeda behind. But still, he had many jihadis or transnational jihadis within the group. In 2017, he again actually got rid of many of these hardcore people and became HTS, or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So this is, for me, I see it as a very practical group, or a very practical person who was undergoing a lot of reformations, reconsiderations of what I and the Syrian people need. So it's a good step in the right direction. And if we look at the different groups that are on the Syrian soil, Al-Shara, or former Jolani, represents the best available option of the other options. Even if you look at the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurdish-led forces, which has a PKK component, which is also an EU sanctioned group. So they are aspiring for an independent state. So they are not representative of the Syrian people as an inclusive entity or an inclusive country for everyone. So we have to be patient. The Syrian people have revolted against a well-established dictatorship. And if al-Shara, I assure you, if al-Shara doesn't deliver on his promises that Syria will be for all the Syrians, we will revolt again.
Yeah. And to go back to Panzu, what challenges does international aid encounter, and how is it organized at the moment?
Yes, there's a lot of challenges at this moment. You see that a lot of countries and in Europe are cutting down their budget for humanitarian aid. The Netherlands is cutting down 1/3 of their budget for humanitarian aid. And just a few days ago, we heard about the plans of the United States to basically cut, the U.S. aid. And the U.S. aid is basically contributing more than 40% of the humanitarian aid in the world. So that will have enormous impact in the world. If we think about the wealth, if we think about stability, and if you think about people having their medication for diseases or anything else, having drinks or having really the basic needs, basically. It's really terrible what is happening at this moment. And I think that because this is happening, Europe and the Netherlands as well, they should reconsider cutting off the budget, which is happening at this moment, because we are going to face the reality, the consequences of it, if we don't. And of course, it's we are talking about basic needs, but there's also a geopolitical aspect to it, and there's also basically our own benefits as a country is also part of it. That we don't let, for instance, the cooperation that we used to have with several countries internationally, we are going back to it, and I think it will be very bad for us as a country as well, for our own stability, our safety, and also for our own health. So the future doesn't look really bright. Well, let me just say, I don't have a lot of faith in the current government. But what is clear is that I will do anything possible to mobilize people and to make sure that this cutting of the budget for humanitarian aid, that it doesn't happen, because the Syrian people, but also other people in the country who are depending on it, really need our help, and we need to step up instead of cut down the budget.
And the international actors, they played a big part in the war in Syria. What is the role of international actors at the moment? Maybe.
Well, if I can follow up, I think what happened after the fall of the Berlin Wall is also a very interesting analogy. I mean, of course, no history repeats itself in a way that we can learn from the history and then do copy-paste. Mm-hmm. But when you look at what happened to the accession countries, the EU member states who came from the other side of the wall, Poland, different countries, I mean, they really benefited from the European Union umbrella in rule of law, in democracy education, access to a lot of peer-to-peer education. I think we can learn from this example. And I know that many Gulf states, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, they have many national organizations and charity organizations, and you can sometimes question whether they have an agenda that might not fit with ours, but would fit very well with the Syrian agenda. So again, as like Ali said, we should take off our own Eurocentric glasses and see what the opportunities are. And I think the Gulf states are willing to bring expertise, money, and we should cooperate. So let's ask our Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Minister for Development Aid, I still cannot use this term, cooperation, and ask them, what is your agenda in involving and engaging the Gulf states who have the money and who are also from, sort of international solidarity point of view, a brother country or a sister country, let's make this gender neutral, willing to step up. So let's work together.
I think that's a very good question.
Yeah.
So
for tomorrow.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, exactly. We have a debate tomorrow. Yeah.
To wrap this conversation up, I would like to ask you both, the three of you, your key takeaways from this conversation. Maybe we can start with Pansu.
Well, I think there is hope. That's, I think, my takeaway. I think it's good to hear about so many people who are involved in this. And I do believe that the Netherlands and also at the European level, we should do everything possible to give the Syrian people a chance. And for me, it's definitely lifting up those sanctions.
Thank you. Petra?
I'm very happy with what Ali said about the Syrians, because many people, Syrians are not known. Yes, we have met the Syrians who came to the Netherlands, extremely hospitable people. The mosaic in that country, there's so many layers of ethnicities, of men, women. Of course, I always get this question about what about the women? And I'm like, seriously, what about the women? Who kept this country going for 14 years? The women in the villages, the women in the cities, the women who are standing in front of the prisons to bring food to their loved ones. I, as a feminist, keep my mouth shut for a while because I can learn from the Syrian women and their resilience in standing up against this dictator. So I think we really need to take the Syrian people seriously. And one last thing, there are amazing tradespeople. Seriously, if Minister Klever wants to encourage Dutch business in Syria, the Syrian business people are amazing partners, because when you go through the souk of Damascus, I talked about this before, but the way they use even the departure of Bashar al-Assad, whose picture was found in his Hema underwear, and now they are selling cups with a little drawing of him, and in Arabic it says Abu Kalsoon, the father of the underwear. They make business out of everything. So extremely good business opportunity with great people to negotiate and do business with. Ali, this was my love song to the Syrians.
Yeah, and they including me are loving it very much. It's amazing. It's great how to see this joke. Actually, I loved when you read it on the radio the other day. I loved when it went viral actually on Syrian social media accounts, being translated, and now the Dutch people are even talking about this bad guy. So he didn't even respect that thing. He didn't spare it. But my actually last takeaway, last word. I think what the Syrian people did should be remembered and should not actually, we should not come across this as an one-time or one-off event or episode. If you look at the changes that they have made to the map, it's great. The Iranians have been spoilers for quite some time. And we have managed actually to save a lot of countries from their evil. The drugs that have been actually invading the markets, including European markets, have been also cut off. It's a longer process, but we. As Syrian people, we need support. We need also recognition that what we have done is a big lesson, also for those who are aspiring for change, for democracy, and for a dignified life.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you
for this conversation. And thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to the public as well. And I would like to remind you that we have another edition of the Blik of de Wereld coming up next week about Germany. So hope to see all of you there as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Ali.